'Tis I, your old pal, King Chuck. Happy beginning of the week. Well, it's actually quite comfortable outside. 74 degrees as I'm talking to you, although we are expecting some really nasty weather. Well, let's try to talk some good. Let's start with something good. Tigers won against the Marlins. All 3 games in the series. Good. The Pistons are in the playoffs. And some speculate that by the way they're playing it, they could actually make the NBA Finals. Really good, considering that just a few short years ago they were really in the shitter. Yeah, people were cramming up Little Caesars Arena, screaming, sell the team to Tom Gores. Well, Tom Gores did the right thing and hired a brand new coach, and now the team is kicking ass and taking a few names with them. But what about those Pistons? What about those Red Wings? 10 years in a row without making the playoffs. And all I can say is some people are saying Steve Yzerman needs to be fired. I don't know at this point. I actually watched a Red Wings game this weekend, the one they lost, and with my mother. And my mom is probably a bigger Red Wing fan than I've ever been. She actually went to the old Olympia. And she actually told me she doesn't even recognize any of the players anymore. And I'm like, I don't blame you, And the Red Wings were a great team for decades, and then it's like for the last 10 years they've become a shadow of their former selves, and I don't know what to say about that. But as Meatloaf once sang, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And unfortunately, Meatloaf was a MAGA Republican. And, I was not necessarily into him at all. I was never really into most 70s music at all, to tell you the truth. I've always been a new rock guy. Maybe some AEL alternative stuff as well, but everything with Trump is a disaster. Donald Trump last night went on a giant binge on his failing Truth Social account. And over the weekend, talks between J.D. Vance and the Iranian government failed. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be in this god-awful war for some time to come. And unfortunately, now there's one man on earth who absolutely, totally hates him, and that's Pope Leo. Pope Leo announced that he is not happy with Trump over his war. And, he had to point out that, God hates war. Well, of course. God hates a lot of stuff. And, folks, I'm no biblical scholar. And I love it when, I think even Trump even said, does Pope Leo even read the Bible? And I'm like, look, I'm not a fan of Catholicism. And 55% of all Catholics here in America voted for this big orange cocksucker. I'll call him who he is. A big orange cocksucker. And what is very pitiful is the absolute fact that Donald, hold on, I was just passing a bus here. The sad truth, folks, is that Donald Trump is the president of the United States because he lied. He said that he was not going to get us into another war. Yeah, he did. He lied to us about getting us into he said that he was going to lower gas prices. No, he did not. I just passed through 4 gas stations. They're all at $3.99 a gallon. He lied to us about pretty much everything. He said that everything's going to be very cheap from now on. I mean, everything has skyrocketed because of tariffs. Yeah. And, and one thing, it's like, not only that, last night on social media, on Truth Social, he talked about how he claimed he actually helped Ed McMahon save his house. And if he didn't listen to Maya's Touch today. So the story was, Ed McMahon, towards the end of his life, was broke. And I don't know exactly why he lost so much money, but his home was in foreclosure. So Donald claimed on social media, on Truth Social last night, that he actually jumped in and bought the house. But guess what? Midas Touch had the receipts. Trump didn't buy the house. It was actually sold to a real estate guy. And he helped Ed McMahon work out a deal to stay in his home. I mean, it's true. Sometimes, you cut a deal to stay in your house if you are broke as hell. I mean, I remember that, same thing kind of happened with Hugh Hefner. And, the story was Playboy magazine circulation went downhill. They were competing against the internet. And what had happened was they made the decision to sell the Playboy mansion, and they sold it to the man who owned Twinkies in Hostess. Yeah, he rescued the company many years ago. He bought the Playboy mansion, and there was an edict that Hugh had to stay in there. And I guess they don't have that anymore. And just recently, they decided to bring back the print edition of Playboy. I took a peek at it, and they're actually back to showing Bush again, which is nice. I mean, I hate, watching a movie or looking at a magazine, girl's totally naked, and she doesn't show, it's like she doesn't want to show her bush to anybody except the cameraman and the lighting crew. And yeah, I hate those types of women. But the sad reality, folks, is, there's the internet. I mean, it's like, why pay X amount of dollars for Playboy magazine when for free you can look at it on the internet? And but here's the problem now. Of course, you got all these fucking red states that want to boycott pornography. And they do it, they're basically making it tough to go to certain websites because they're on the shit list of all these red states. And that's exactly what's going on. They now they say, okay, well, we're doing this to protect children. From what? I told you the story, folks. I looked at my first pornographic image when I was like 14 years old. And thankfully my dad was with me when I saw that image of I think it was a woman performing a blowjob on a guy in one of my uncle's old club magazines from 30 odd years ago. And I'm like, it was gross at the time, but I learned this is what couples do. This is what a committed couple does. Anyway, so getting back to what I was talking to you about. So, speaking of housing, over the weekend I was watching CBS Sunday Morning. And it's one of the last shows, I think, that really it's not really an advertisement, really, of Trump, which is nice. They actually did a story a couple of weeks ago about the Trump regime forcing our parks to take down anything having to do with slavery. Because the Trump regime wants to teach kids that slavery wasn't really a bad thing. Okay, so getting whipped around by a black person getting whipped around by a white guy was a great thing? Whatever. But the point is, on Sunday Morning this week, they did a story about how now the average first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. My mom and dad bought their first house in 1979. And they paid $24,000 for it. I bought my first house in just 5 years ago, and I paid $209,000 for it. But there's a little catch. I don't live in this house by myself. I share it with my dad. And my dad lives there virtually rent-free. I mean, he'll give me a few bucks if I need it, because he knows that sometimes I don't have, because I have to kind of support him too. He only makes not minimum wage, but he only makes Social Security. Okay, he makes like $1,000 a month on Social Security. And, and unfortunately I have to put up with some of his bullshit too. And it can be sad. But I shouldn't say it's good news. Of course, he had back surgery last year, and he's very thankful that I can come around and help him with chores and cooking and whatever I can do. But you see, folks, it's sad that so anyway, I was watching this thing on CBS, and they showcased a couple who lived in Northern California, and everything was too fucking expensive. And, of course, not only that, there was the story from last week regarding the guy who burnt down the warehouse that stored Huggies and Kleenex. Kimberly Clark had it. And what happened was he taped himself on his phone, setting the place on fire. He was lighting up toilet paper and diapers and anything flammable in his path. And he was saying the same shit over and over again. This is what happens when you don't pay us a livable wage. And I know. And meanwhile, on the same story from CBS, they talked to some folks from Topeka, Kansas. And they showcased a family that lives in Topeka who moved from California to that town. And they only paid $179,000 for a 4-bedroom home. Which is perfect because, they're a growing family. And, the wife has a job working, has a job. She's a school teacher. The point is that they want to tell people, if you can't afford to live in your hometown, move somewhere else. And I understand, I look at the good and the bad of it. My mom and dad struggled for many years. And at one point, I remembered when I was a little boy, they wanted to move to Phoenix. They wanted to sell the ranch and go to Phoenix. And it never happened because the economy up north sucked. And so of course my dad got the house when my mom left my dad. And he sold it. So anyway, he sold the house for I think it was like $68,000. And when he sold it to an older family, older couple from Detroit. And they ended up foreclosing during the economic recession in 2008. And the part of the reason why was because there's no jobs up north. None. It's like, okay, let's work at McDonald's for $10 an hour. And speaking of restaurants, I mean, Elk Rapids, which is the town I grew up in, the story is a lot of restaurants have closed there because, the owners can't afford to pay their workers a livable wage. I mean, Elk Rapids is a town that only makes money 3 months out of the year, pretty much. And it's a lot of money, but still. I mean, I remembered working at a restaurant in Elk Rapids growing up. And, I worked as a dishwasher. And during the off season, I only worked 2 days a week. But anyway, the point, folks, is that I look at young people, and I mean, it is tough out there. Because it took me 19 years to buy my first house. And of course, yes, there's the condition that Dad lives with me. And sometimes I have to put up with his politics, and he doesn't get it. He thinks that Trump is, helping America. And every time, Donald Trump wants people to think that everything's going, it's like, yeah, he tries to put wool over our eyes. Like what he did last night on his social media by giving out that false testimony about Ed McMahon. He did not help Ed McMahon, folks. Instead, somebody else bought the house. And then, on top of that, he and it's like he goes to these rallies and screams, transgender, tariffs. It's like, dude. And, oh yeah, another thing that happened today, happy to announce, the lawsuit between him and the Wall Street Journal, judge overturned it. Because Trump did not provide enough evidence that he needs $10 billion from that newspaper over the fact that, he gave out a birthday card to Epstein. And of course, let's not forget what happened this past weekend when Melania told everyone, oh, I don't know Jeffrey Epstein. I never met him. I met Donald Trump by chance. You see, I was smart enough not to vote for this asshole, even though I've had people all around me saying that if you vote for Kamala, you must be gay. You must be a pussy. You must be a wuss. Not true, folks. Because I've lived through this type of shit before. When George W. Bush was president and he got us into a war over oil. And I mean, gas prices are virtually the same now as they were back then. And it's all because that's what Republicans want. Wars over oil. And Donald Trump, on the other hand, we're going bass accurate under him. Some of you may, here in Michigan, I don't know what area they covered, but some of you may have bought gas at one point from this oil company called Total. Total is a French company, and they served northern Michigan, where I grew up, for decades. There were Total stations everywhere growing up. And back in so the story was they pulled out of northern Michigan like 25 years ago. And the story is that Total is still in business. And I guess they have gas stations all throughout Europe and around the world. And Total is one of the largest oil companies on earth. They're one of the 6 members of OPEC. But like a lot of the oil companies, they want to produce energy not from oil, but from wind, renewable energy. And guess what happened? They proposed building some windmills in several areas of the United States. And when Donald Trump heard about that, he told Total, fuck off. You're not going to build a windmill, any windmills, because coal and gas is where it's at here in America. So guess who's paying Total not to build these windmills? We are, the taxpayer. And what the fuck is going on here? You see, Trump, this is what happens, folks, when you vote for somebody with an R after their name. This is what happens, folks. You end up with $4 gas, and people were dumb enough to blame Biden, for when gas prices went sky high. And, he lies that there's a deal in the works. No, there isn't. And, and J.D. Van, and that's the thing. The thing is, folks, is that, Trump will continue to lie and lie and lie. And we end up with no health insurance, with higher grocery costs, higher rent costs. I mean, and what's even more pathetic is that, so every week I go to a park that's close by to me. And I go there because it's my dog's favorite place on the face of the earth. So what happened is there's a homeless man that hangs out there, and there's a little gazebo that he hangs out there, and they got free Wi-Fi, and he can watch his movies and stuff on his phone. And so the story was, he's a Trump supporter, and he even told me that he hopes that under Trump, real estate will be a lot cheaper, so that way he can afford a place to live. But here's what I have to say. That's not how shit works. I'll tell you how shit works, folks. We gotta tax the wealthy. It worked under FDR, folks. And it created jobs left and right. And the wealthiest people in America were still wealthy. It's like these people are hoarding every single dime in the world. Well, you have to work harder for what you want in life, and that's not right. And, And that's the thing. And, it's like I can talk about history. I can talk about, the fact that the baby boomers got us there. And that many of the presidents in my lifetime were all baby boomers who all died. Trump dodged the draft, and so did George W. Bush. And they were wartime presidents. And people want to look at them as fucking heroes. You see, folks, this is why I get angry at the baby boomer generation. They got us to where we are now. All because, their generation didn't look, their generation's Democrats didn't help them out. Whereas FDR, who was a true progressive, was. And worked us and got us out of that giant hole known as the Great Depression. And not only that, I look at some of the baby boomers out there who call themselves liberals. Like Bill O'Reilly, Bill Maher. Did you hear what Bill Maher said on his show? And apologies, I'm by the fire department in town here. So let me tell you what happened. On his show, Real Time, on Friday night, Bill Maher said something incredibly stupid. He has a segment on the show called, New Rules. And New Rules ends with a commentary on current events. And his commentary on Friday dealt with he talks about all this all the time. He talks about cancel culture, because he was a victim of cancel culture. Long time ago, he made the mistake of referring himself to the N-word. And so when he did that, the next week, HBO made him do this show where he was schooled on why it's important for white people not to use the N-word. Let's remember that. It was many years ago. And then what happened was, I noticed too in recent years, he used to have 5 guests on the show. He had 1 guest in the beginning, and then he'd do a 3-person panel, and then he'd end the show with another guest. He only has 3 people now. And gee, I wonder why. Oh yeah, it's because people hate his guts. It's like he's all over the place politically. It's like one week he makes sense, and the next week you just want to punch his sorry ass out. But this week he made this commentary about cancel culture, and he was upset about all these schools getting rid of Cesar Chavez school and Cesar Chavez this and that. And the reason why was because he was caught. Allegedly, he was a sexual offender. So what happened was all these schools are changing their name, covering up his name, and blah, blah, blah. And now Cesar Chavez is trying to be, it's like, that's the thing. It turned out that there's enough evidence to prove that he was a sex offender. And people had to wait until he died to say that. And then what happened was he went into a Bill Maher, about the president of Saudi Arabia, and, his people killed Khashoggi. The columnist, the writer for the Washington Post. But, he allows women to drive now, and women can do this, and women can do that in Saudi Arabia. And, we got to do business in Saudi Arabia because that's where a lot of our oil comes from. And then on top of that, we got to be nice to, let's not forget the founding father of America, Thomas Jefferson. He raped a slave. But we can't cancel him. Okay. Dude, Bill, you're fucking Jewish. I'm surprised you did not say that Hitler built the Autobahn. Or Jimmy Savile raised millions of dollars for multiple charities all across the world. Or that Bill Cosby made kids better with Fat Albert. We need, and I understand. I'm not a saint. You're not a saint. And all of us have fucked up one way or another. But the reality is, Bill, you're a boomer. You added to this problem. Your generation added to this are the reason why most young people can't afford to live in a nice house. They have to live in a shitty apartment. And some people get bullied because they have to have a shitty apartment and maybe even a roommate. Let's remember, the guy who burnt down the warehouse in California was only making about $18 an hour, and the average apartment in the area was $2,000 a month. The distance between the wealthy and what they get paid and the have-nots have skyrocketed. And even I haven't had a raise in about 3 years. And before that, I didn't get a raise for 10 years with my first boss at my company. I don't want to hear, well, why don't you change your job? Why don't you move? Yeah, I understand. Sometimes moving is a good thing. I look at the good and the bad about Grand Rapids, especially when it comes to relationships. Folks, I went on my first date in 2 years with a woman that I met online on Sunday, excuse me. She was nice. I really liked her, even though she was about 3-4 years older than I was. Guess what? I have not heard from her since. And I shot her a text that was nice to meet you. Didn't hear from her since. It reminds me of the story of my cousin. I have a cousin who lived here in Grand Rapids, and no girl wanted him. Then he moved to Detroit. Guess what? Not only is he happily married with 4 kids now, he doesn't even have to work because his wife does all the work for him. And she makes very good money in real estate. The point is, folks, is that sometimes, yes, I agree with that report. Sometimes moving to another town is nice. And, and Grand Rapids does have its problems. And it has to do with people. But here's the thing. Instead of burning down warehouses or workplaces and protesting against, this is what we need to do. Vote. Get off your ass and vote. And vote. Don't just vote. Vote for true progressives. Don't vote for people who call themselves a Democrat and yet they do a lot of shitty stuff. Primaries are the important thing to vote for. I mean, don't just vote for somebody with a D after their name. Hell, look at what's going on here in Michigan. This is what this is what the Republicans are doing. They are, they're putting their money behind all the candidates, but they're also putting their money behind the former mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, who was a Democrat when he was when he was mayor, but now he's running as an independent. And some Democrats are mad at him for doing that. And the reason being is because now he's splitting the ticket in two. And I've yet to see one TV ad for Jocelyn Benson. I mean, she's the front runner right now. And all I can say, folks, is this is going to be a pretty interesting election. I just hope that we don't end up with a Republican who's going to fuck up this state, maybe even worse than Prick Snyder. Yeah, look at what happened. It's like the last two governors the state had were fuck-ups who were Republican. John Engler fucked up our roads and fucked up our schools. And then there was, and of course, Rick Snyder fucked up the whole city of Flint. And I know, Gretchen had her problems too, like the 24% tax on marijuana that she put on. But you know what, folks? At least she was a better governor. She is a better governor than pretty much everyone else. I just hope. The only thing I didn't like about her was that she wasn't progressive enough. But she was one of the better governors in my lifetime. So, in conclusion, you look at this shit show known as Trump. High gas prices, lie after lie. And the fact of the matter is, this guy is, folks, he has dementia. There is enough concrete proof that he does have dementia, and he's lying to cover his ass, like the Ed McMahon story. And, knock it off with these stories that make you look good, when in fact it doesn't. It's kind of like you look at Brian Williams. Look at what happened to him. He told the lie that he was on a plane that crashed or whatever it was, and he was a hero or whatever. No, it was another plane that did it, that happened. And that's what caused his career to go downhill. That's why he was forced to leave NBC. Anyway, all I can say is that, let's see, it's April now, and so only 8 months more of this shit until we can finally start to tell Trump, your jig is up. Let's 25 this bastard out of the White House and reclaim America for better. Good day and good luck, everyone. I'll talk to you later.